All right. So, I obviously don't need to tell you that I'm really glad you're here. What I wanted to tell you, though, starting is that the class is an experiential class because the purpose of it is to become seen, heard, and valued, not only in our romantic relationships, but in all our relationships. So, I'm going to be asking you to participate, but you get to participate at whatever level you feel comfortable. Okay. Now, in the chat, I have put the workbook. I'm not sure if all of you have downloaded it, but if you haven't, feel free to do that. I have created a program to support women who overgive in their relationships. And as a result of doing that, they want to be seen, heard, and valued because they're tired of either being invisible or feeling like they're not enough or that they don't matter. So the purpose is changing the imbalance and teaching women the skills and tools that they need to transform the limiting childhood belief systems that, believe it or not, we've all internalized. Women have been told for many, many years to be seen but not heard. And when women stand up and they're honest, it can, a lot of times create conflict. So the purpose of this masterclass is to show you ways in which you can speak up for yourself, but without having to blow up your relationship or become estranged from your mom or have your daughter or son not speaking to you, okay? But one of the things that does happen when we receive these cultural messages is that we soften, we edit, we also overfunction, and believe it or not, we disappear just enough to stay safe. And it's not because we're weak, and it's actually because we're wise, because we've been told our whole lives to stand out from the crowd is a dangerous thing to do. And so that's how we learned how to survive. So today isn't about changing you or undoing you, it's about understanding you. And understanding something that a lot of women don't realize is that this isn't, first of all, about blaming your partner, because God knows our partners, whether they're female or male, they too are the recipients of cultural messages that they've received, as well as messages they've received from their family of origin. For example, if you were a guy, you've been told since you were a little boy that it's your job and responsibility to provide for your family. So today is not about blaming anybody. It's not about blaming yourself, and it's certainly not about blaming your parents. It's about making the invisible visible. What mostly blocks connection, whether it's in a friendship or in a loving relationship or even in a parental child relationship, isn't conscious. It's something we've learned, it's patterned, and believe it or not, it's protective. And what those are our belief systems. And belief systems are emotional habits and survival strategies. And if we can uncover what those are, they lose their power. Because those belief systems affect all your relationships. Now, some women come to this workshop because of a romantic relationship, but what we're talking about does not just affect your romantic relationship. It affects your friendships, how you parent, your relationship with your parents, your relationship with your siblings and your coworkers. But most importantly, it affects your relationship with yourself. Because wherever you go, it's kind of like having matching luggage, your patterns go with you. And when you shift, everything shifts. So this is really important to know, that we carry things around us, whether we realize it or not, that affect how we truly think, feel, and behave. What I'm just showing you here is the platform in which we do our work. And the reason why I've built a platform like this is that studies show that only 3% of people finish a course when it's not interactive. And so what I'm going to be doing is combining live teaching with an interactive platform. So those of you who love gaming might enjoy this. And I'll come back to that in a little bit, but it will be really fun. But as I said, this is an interactive presentation. So what I'd like you guys first to do is to open up your booklet and take a moment and go to page 4 and then page 5 and fill in those 2 reflective questions. And I'm going to just stick on a little bit of music to give you time to do that. Okay, has everyone had a chance to fill in those 2 questions? So I know this sounds really self-explanatory. The first key to being seen is wanting to be seen. But believe it or not, even though that sounds really simple, for many women, it feels terrifying because wanting visibility also requires vulnerability. And vulnerability requires safety. And safety is something that many women were never taught how to feel. Instead, what we were taught was love comes from being useful. Belonging comes from being agreeable. Safety comes from being low maintenance, right? So connection, we're told, comes from being needed. So we, as women, we learn how to read the room, we learn how to manage other people's emotions, we learn how not to ask for too much, but in the process, we also lose touch with ourselves, right? Because you can't be seen in your authentic self if you're constantly in your head editing, and you can't be cherished if you're in hiding. And a lot of times when women give, while it feels like kindness, right? It feels like maturity and love, but it's often fear. We feel that there is no such thing as the 50-yard line where, our partners come and meet us at that 50-yard line. We're always feeling that we have to be the loss leader. We need to go to the 80-yard line and only ask that they come to the 20. And the problem with that is that we become invisible. If we're always doing the heavy lifting in the relationship, whether it's even with our moms or our kids, like we're chaperoning them here, there, and everywhere, and yet we're not asking for anything in return. Their bedrooms are a mess. They have this sense of entitlement. Hey, mom, I've got soccer, They don't give you any notice. Well, this is what starts to happen when we start to overgive to our own detriment. So I want to tell you that we come by this naturally. And one of the things that you come to understand is that the reason for some of this is cultural. And so what are some of the cultural barriers? Well, one of them is the approval addiction barrier. And what does that mean? It means we've been taught that if we're not liked, we're not safe. Okay, we learned early on in life to be pleasant, to be agreeable, don't make waves. So what we ended up doing is trading the truth for approval. And not because we're fake, but this is how we were taught by culture to protect ourselves. And as I said, this doesn't just show up with our partners. How many times do you edit yourself with your parents? How about with your friends? Maybe with your boss? Now with your boss, it's a whole different dynamic, but at the same time, if we start to feel we're so disingenuous in our workplace, then you can be sure that people are going to feel that. So what ends up happening is while we become the emotional regulator for everybody else, we as people slowly disappear. The second one is the confidence gap. What does that mean? Well, they did a study where they had a group of men and a group of women in a room. They gave them a problem to solve. And when the time was up, the men immediately came forward with their solutions. They weren't 100% sure, but they immediately came forward with, oh, well, I think we should do this and we should do that. What was really stunning about this is not only did the women not raise their hands, but a lot of them erased the work that they had done. Because as far as they were concerned, it wasn't ready to present. It wasn't perfect. So this is really typical in culture. In the study, they found that only 15% of women will step out of their comfort zone before they have found that everything is to their liking and speak up. Men, 85%. And if they make mistakes, they're just like, well, I didn't have much time to think about it, but now that you mention it, yeah, that's a good point. And they keep going. But with women, no way. And the reason is we have this little voice in our heads going, hey, you're not ready yet. I'll speak up when I'm more certain. I'll ask when I deserve it. Men ask for promotions and increases in income all the time. If you've ever worked with men, my God, they've barely done 2 months and they want to know when their next raise is. Where women rarely ask for it because they want to wait until they feel they deserve it and until their boss thinks they deserve it. Confidence doesn't come before visibility. It comes through visibility. So think about this for a second. If you're always hidden and you're not stepping out of your comfort zone, right, you're not visible. So until we put ourselves out of our comfort zone and we allow ourselves to be visible, we can't gain confidence. All right, the third thing that culture teaches us is an expectations gap. And we all know about this, even though women are fighting hard for equality and pay. The expectation of culture is that women should be satisfied with less. Women are taught, I shouldn't want too much. I should shrink. I need to tone down my desire. I need to settle. I need to be grateful. And it shows up everywhere. Just think about your own life. Think about in romance, with your family, with your friendships, in your work. I call the expectations gap the lack of boundaries gap. Because we give and we give and we give and we think, okay, if I just keep giving, eventually they'll give it back. But I don't know about you, but if somebody's giving, and I'm taking, why would it occur to me to give back? I'd be able to rationalize it by saying, well, she just does that because she likes to. But when you have a boundary, and think about that 50-yard line again, right? You give and you give, but you then come back to your 50-yard line to give the other person in the relationship, again, whether it's your mother, your sister, a chance to meet you on the 50-yard line. I know that we think if we just give enough, they'll love me more. It's the exact opposite. When we have a boundary and say no, people actually find us more attractive. I remember when I was growing up, back in the day, when we could all play out on the street and not worry about being kidnapped or anything like that, my parents had a very strict curfew. And boy, oh boy, if you didn't show up for that curfew, you were in big trouble. But I remember growing up with some friends who, we were teenagers at the time, that didn't have curfews. And they used to brag, oh, poor you, you've got to go home. Carrie has a curfew, that kind of stuff. But when I spoke to them years later, because we were still all really good friends, what I heard the most, you were so lucky, Care, when you were growing up because your parents really cared about you. I could come home at 1 o'clock in the morning and all the lights were off and my parents were asleep. And what was the message they were left with? They don't really care. How does that fall into boundaries? It's the exact same thing. If you give and you give and you give, you're not actually containing the person you're giving to. And without containment, all of us feel a little bit unsafe. So that's why a lot of us like schedules, because at least we know that we have to do this, we have to do this, and we have to do that. But when we're with somebody who's all loosey-goosey, there isn't that feeling of safety. There's not that feeling of containment. So boundaries aren't about being selfish. Boundaries are about having your own bottom line and letting that other person understand that you're not a doormat. You don't have to be angry about it. You don't have to get angry. You don't have to raise your voice or do anything of the like. But having a boundary is going to make you so much more attractive to your boss, to your friends, and to your lovers, and even your kids, even though they won't agree with that. All right. So then we have what I already talked about, which was the approval addiction. And approval addiction isn't vanity. When we were children, we learned that it's called safety. When we are being approved of, it feels safe. It feels like I'm liked, I'm needed, I belong. So, what we learned how to do is to anticipate, to over explain, to manage, but no one ever taught us how to stop. And of course, the stop is, once again, the boundary. So I've gone into a little bit about the approval addiction, but I want you to take a look at this slide because what I want to talk to you about now is our belief systems. Now, when we were growing up, I want you to take a moment, we were all given different messages, whether it's from school teachers, whether it was from our babysitter, our parents, our next door neighbors. And they usually fall into one of these categories: love and intimacy, leadership and impact, prosperity, purpose, and success. So let's look at that first column. I'm not lovable. I don't matter. I'm not wanted. I'm not safe. I'm a burden. I'm not enough. Then under leadership, you have, as you can see, I'm too much, I'm powerless, I'm a failure. And then when you go into prosperity and success, I don't belong here. I don't have what it takes. I'm inferior. And believe it or not, this isn't something you just got when you entered into, let's say, the workforce. It's something that we were told from the very time that we were little kids. So what I'd love you to do right now is go to page 9 in your book and take a look at these questions. Now, some of you may have never felt this way, but I think most of us have always felt or sometimes felt at some point in our lives, in some circumstance, that we were invisible. Another word for invisible is that we didn't matter. So I'd like you to go to the book and just reflect back on when this happened to you. And I'm going to say with a certain degree of certainty that you'll remember. Now, it may not even have been in childhood. It might be recently. It could have been last week. Could have been when you were passed up for a promotion, even though you worked that much harder. It could be in a friendship where you've always been there for your friend, but then she goes off on a trip to Greece and doesn't invite you, but invites a bunch of other people. So I'm going to put on some music just to give you a little bit of a chance. Now, if invisible or I don't matter isn't a reflection that you can identify with, that's okay. There are plenty more. All right, I'll give you just a second to fill that in. So belief systems. This is me, in case you hadn't guessed. This was when I was about ranging in age from maybe 4, 5, and 6. I was teaching this course. We did a beta program of it. And I was thinking about my own history. And it suddenly occurred to me that the story about my life had predated the story I had told everybody in my beta class, because I was at a conference and they were saying, I want you to write down your story. And this is what I wrote. And I have to say, it blew me away because I wasn't expecting this to happen. But remember when I said to you that sometimes we're not even conscious of our own belief systems that we've grown up with? Well, this would be an example of this, and where I had an epiphany, because when he said, okay, sit down and write your own story, I fully expected to write a completely different story. But this is what I wrote. Once upon a time, there was a little girl who thought everything around her was an adventure waiting to happen. But rather than her family being excited by her exuberance, she was constantly told to tone it down. I remember in particular when my grandmother came to visit me, and I said to her, "Granny, that's your fourth banana." And of course, "Shh, shh, shh, Gary, don't tell your grandmother that." So that was me, unfiltered, full of life, and I didn't really understand why they were telling me I couldn't say to my grandmother, because I wanted a banana, that she'd already had four. But anyway, so she had a little friend, and you can see him right there holding my hand. His name was Andre. Andre thought Carrie was terrific. He never told Carrie to tone it down. He was my hero. He is in actual fact still a dear, almost family member. Our birthdays are 1 year and 1 month apart. I'm August 19th and he's July 19th. Do you see him there? Apparently it was his birthday that day. Why am I showing you these pictures? Because my epiphany happened at that conference, and it was about this time in my life. Because when I went off to school, my teachers would tell me that I needed, again, to tone it down. That's code for "you're too much." As a matter of fact, I used to spend more time in the corner for talking than in the classroom. Gary talks too much. And the thing that I loathed more than anything in the world was my report card. Not because I didn't get good grades. I got average grades. Actually, I got pretty good grades. But it was the comment section. Carrie talks too much in class. And guess what? They didn't notice the A's. They didn't notice the B's. All they noticed were the comments. So all I kept hearing as I was growing up is that I needed to tone it down. So it didn't help that my older sister was a forceps baby birth. And so from the time we were little, and that's her in her first communion dress, she was my parents' wounded bird. Everything I did had to be downplayed so that Susan didn't feel badly. This went on my whole life. In fact, when I was about 17 or 18, my parents told me that I couldn't go to a party with my boyfriend unless I brought my sister. And I was like, why would I bring my sister? I'm going to a party with my boyfriend. And the thing was, she had just come back from New Zealand, and my parents felt sorry for her. And it was only that my aunt was visiting from Ireland that she intervened and said, Peter, for God's sakes, would you just let the girl go off and have a good time? So this has been the story of my life. I started to look for acceptance elsewhere, but I also learned to be on guard all the time about being too much. So what did I do? Well, I found venues where I could be myself and it would be acceptable. I found friends who enjoyed my exuberance. I consciously was always worried about being too much. And one of the venues that I found was I became an entertainment reporter via being a weather lady, right? And I got to be at the Oscars 2 years in a row. I did the Emmys, the DGAs, everything. But this is a place where if you're too much, you can really shine because you're called on the red carpet to ad lib, because whichever star walks in front of you when the satellite opening happens for your channel, you have to interview that person off the cuff. So again, this was a place where I could channel all of that. But in spite of it, I have to say that even to this day, I really have to fight that feeling that I'm too much. I'm too much. I'm not lovable. I'm a phony. I'm not smart enough. I'm not good enough. Somewhere in our childhood, we started to get those messages. And maybe not from our parents, but definitely we got them from someone. So, what I'd like you to do is go to page 19 of your book, and in thinking about your life, which one of these belief systems do you feel you've carried with you right into adulthood? And I'll put on the music again to give you a chance to write that down. Okay. So I want to dig down a little bit to show you a belief system and how we can work together to bring that belief system more into present day, because a lot of our belief systems, which stem from childhood or from culture, actually don't apply to who we are today. But we still hold on to them, and they still affect how we think about ourselves, how we feel about ourselves, and also how we behave. So I'm going to use the example of I am invisible, right? Which can either be also that I don't matter or people don't really see me. But here's the interesting thing about people who feel they're invisible, women, is they are empathetic and they always make others feel deeply seen. They're great listeners. They're an emotional anchor. But the problem is, if you're one of these people who feels invisible, when you need support, you don't know how to ask for it. Or you feel guilty for needing it because you're always there for everybody else, regardless of the relationship you're in, right? Now, being visible means vulnerable, right? So here are some of the limiting belief systems of somebody who feels like they're invisible. I'm not seen. I don't exist. Other people don't care about me. So the very first thing that we do is we talk about noticing the story that we're telling ourselves, not to judge it, but to understand it. So here's a question. Where have you been invisible? Were you invisible because you don't matter, or is it because you didn't feel safe? I want you to just notice that if this applies to you. The main indicators of somebody that feels invisible is what I said to you. They have an incredible insight and ability to be empathetic. They've got great perception and discernment. But here's the thing. Those are amazing skills. If we could combine those skills with stepping out of our comfort zone a little bit, we could go from feeling like we're invisible to being visible to a point that we're comfortable with, but we wouldn't lose all the qualities that we have that make us so attractive to other people. The other thing we have to look at is, what are the key gaps in that story? Am I truly invisible all the time? Or is it only some of the time? Is it when I go home and my mother makes me feel like I don't exist because it's always about my big brother? But wait a minute. Okay, that could be true. But do I really not exist, or am I invisible in all the situations in my life? We might say, oh, well, I'm invisible, I don't matter. But is it accurate? And if it's not accurate, the next step we do is not so much changing the story as updating the story. Because what fit us when we were children doesn't necessarily fit us as adults. So then the question becomes, what's the deeper truth that breaks the pattern? What's the deeper truth about yourself and what's possible? So I'm going to train you to first develop a growth-oriented story. And what do I mean by that? Well, a growth-oriented story is when you're able to move out of your comfort zone to even think about a more accurate story. That's the first. And rather than just thinking that, oh, I'm invisible, nothing's ever going to change. And we cultivate a power center. I'd like you to think about what your belief system is. And I want you to take a moment to reconnect with the most resourceful part of yourself. Maybe you can close your eyes. I'll turn on the music. And I want you to remember a time when you felt powerful, when you felt in control, and when that belief system about yourself wasn't present. I'll give you a second now. And now, what I'd like you to do is think about what's going on in your life where you might feel a little bit more vulnerable and that negative belief system is raising its ugly head. And I want you to take that memory of the powerful you when that belief system disappeared and try melding it in your mind with where you feel vulnerable. And what I mean by that is I want you to take the feelings that you had when you were feeling powerful and try to connect them to the part of you that doesn't feel powerful so that you can remember that you're not your negative belief system. And in that work, what we start to do is we come up with an individualized statement that you can believe. So if we go back to my childhood and my belief system that I have to fight all the time is I'm not going to suddenly say, oh, I'm never too much, right? Because, yeah, I understand that there are times I'm too much. You know, if somebody is not a morning person and they need their cup of coffee and I'm hopping around like the ever-ready bunny, I get that that could be a bit too much for them. But I also know that's not always true. There are times I'm just enough. And if I can hold on to that, then I'm growing. But if I just turn around and say, oh, well, too bad. If they think I'm too much, you know, I don't need them. That's not growth. That's just going from one fixed story to another. Growth is about allowing for the fact that there will be times you might not feel enough. But when you get to those places, or when I feel too much, can I stop and go, is this an old feeling that doesn't fit in this current environment that I'm in right this second? Or am I really being just a little too much and do I need to get a little bit grounded? So there are parts to this growth container. One of them is the amplification, okay? Then there's sponsorship in the fact that when we do this work, you're not doing it alone. And then what we just did is what's called resourcing. But the other big thing that we have to look at is the invisible patterns that have quietly kept us stuck. That might be questioning your worth, silencing your truth, or sabotaging intimacy. And so there are times we use our negative belief system as a shield. Oh, nobody likes me. Oh, now I have an excuse not to go to the party that I don't really want to go to. Things like that. So in the work that we do together, the idea is to break free from having those unrealistic belief systems we've grown out of, to grow into a more accurate story that allows us to not be in a position of all or nothing. And then we designed the growth pathways, breakthroughs. You know, it was me when I was rewriting my story. I was at a conference that I had that epiphany that the story that I thought was my story wasn't my story. So I'm just going to quickly show you the I am not enough. Okay. A person who thinks they're not enough is amazingly generous. They give to other people freely. They also provide a sense of abundance to other people. And they're really good at a lot of things. But they're other directed. And what I mean by that is that they do a lot of self sacrificing. They feel, people who are not enough feel that they have to do more than other people do in order to get attention. So thinking about, they undervalue themselves and what they offer. So this is another belief system. So here is where imposter syndrome shows up. I'm not enough. I'm an imposter. The thing is that it's not accurate. No one person can be not enough in every part of their lives. But if to combat I'm not enough, you're constantly on somebody else's 80-yard line, now you've gone the other extreme because you're over-giving. So the work that we do together is the skills of self-validation and connecting to a deeper truth. So what are the questions we ask? What's more true than what I tell myself? What's the old story? What's a deeper truth about who I am now? And what do I know and feel to be true? So the key shift is to go from scarcity and lack in ourselves to curiosity in other people, but without feeling that we have to overdo it. So in this training, what we do to go from a fixed mindset to a growth mindset is we develop competencies that are directly related to your belief system. I help you connect to your strengths. I connect you with the wise, loving, and resourceful part of yourself. But most importantly, I get you and help you to extend empathy to yourself so that you can break through the inner glass ceiling. I asked you to write down the limiting belief that you most resonate with. I want you to think about what's the deeper truth you want to step into. And when you leave this masterclass today, think about one small action you can take this week to live from that deeper truth. Well, this is the part why I tell you I'm qualified. But I think most of you probably know this about me. I've worked in the corporate world. I've been a psychoanalyst and therapist for over 20 years. And I've also lived through some painful things in my life, a painful breakup. I moved to another country. I had breast cancer. I had 2 career changes. So I have lived a lot of what we're talking about. In terms of education, I'm certified in couples therapy, trauma therapy. As I said, I'm a psychoanalyst. I've been licensed since 2005. So the third key to transforming, not your romantic relationship, but any relationship, is when you go from a monologue to a dialogue. And I'd like you to go to page 30 in your book. When we meet somebody, and whether it's a friend or a boss or a lover, we're enthralled with them. We think they're terrific. But the problem with that is eventually all relationships end up in something that's really normal. It's called the power struggle. We have all experienced it. Remember when we were in our teens and we wanted to go out and explore the world and our mom was trying to keep us down, try to keep us safe. And what did we end up? Loggerheads with mom. Oh no, Mom, you can't come and check out the party. Oh my God, do you know how humiliating that would be? And then when Mom wanted to call your friend's mother because your friend was having the party to make sure that there'd be no drinking and no boys, that's called the power struggle. Now, as adults, we end up, when we're in a power struggle with someone we care about, even with a friend, what ends up happening is it causes anger and depression. Because what we're doing in that moment is we're realizing that we're not clones of each other. Our best friend can be very different from us, and they can have a different belief system. So it's called the objection to the difference. It doesn't mean you have to buy into it. It just means you can tolerate it. And this happens in all our relationships, and especially in our intimate ones. Whereas real love happens when we learn a new way to talk. And what do I mean by that? Well, our universal human need is to be seen, heard, and valued. But listening is something we're not very good at. In fact, we're getting worse at it as days go by. But here's something you may not know. Did you know that our ears are only accurate to 30% of what we're hearing? So think about this. You wonder why somebody didn't quite get what you were saying? Well, if already our sound system can only hear at 30% accuracy, right? It's so easy for us to misunderstand each other. And why is listening only accurate to 30%? Well, just think about the noises right now in the room you're in. Can you hear your refrigerator? Can you maybe hear the buzzing of a clock, your dogs, your cats, the neighbors outside, your electronics humming along, your computer making noise? Well, your ears are taking all of that in at the same time. And that's why accuracy is so low. That's why we have to shift from what I call a monologue to a dialogue if we really want to get to the bottom of what's going on. And what does that mean? Well, how many of us listen to understand versus listening to respond or to defend ourselves? One of the things that we go into in great detail is the imago dialogue, because it requires that we mirror, we validate, and we empathize. If you go to page 30 of your book, it'll show you what that's about. So here's the whole purpose of being able to mirror, validate, and empathize. Mirroring is making sure that you actually heard them accurately. Now, I'm not expecting everybody to walk around when they go, I'll be home at 8. I heard you say you'll be home at 8. Okay. But let's say your partner is telling you something and you're thinking to yourself, seriously? Wait a minute. What does he mean by that? That's where you go, let me make sure I got this. You're telling me such and such. Okay. What you're actually doing is making sure that those defective ears of yours, which only hear at 30% accuracy, actually have heard what you think you heard. So let me give you a really good example. A woman comes home, all the lights are on in the house, and she says to her partner, Julie, the lights are on when I come back. I mean, look at our electricity bill. What the hell is going on? So that would be one way of approaching it. Now, what if she came home and thought, every single time I come home, the lights are on. I wonder what that's about. Hey, Julie, I keep noticing that every time I come home, whether it's day or night, that the lights are on. And I'm starting to think that there must be a reason for this. And Julie looks at her and says, well, what do you mean? Well, we've had this conversation, and yet obviously, unconsciously, you leave all those lights on. And then maybe Julie says something like, well, now that you mention it, I do realize I'm a bit afraid of the dark. Oh, okay. Well, is there more than just being afraid of the dark? And I'm going to fast forward to the end. And then Julie says, wow, I'd never thought of this before, but when I was a kid, when my parents were mad at me, they used to lock me in the closet. That was my timeout room, and there was no light in that room. And I used to have to sit there in the dark until they decided to let me out. Oh, now we're getting to the deeper story of why Julie unconsciously leaves lights on. Now, if the conversation had gone on the way it usually did, which is all about the price of electricity and I can't believe you're doing this again, neither one of them would have got to this point of why Julie leaves the lights on. And when you hear why Julie, who didn't realize it either, keeps the lights on, what do we have? Empathy. We can now, from her perspective, understand why she keeps the lights on. Doesn't mean you're not going to have a conversation about how to keep the bills down, right? But now you have a much better understanding about why your partner's unconscious behavior keeps occurring. And by the way, so does Julie. And that is the beauty of dialogue. When you take the time to listen, to understand, and to keep asking, well, is there more about that? Is there more? You start to get a better understanding. Let's say you've had a fight and they say, well, I was feeling attacked by you, blah, 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 right? When you validate the other person, what you're saying is, I can step into your shoes, and if I see it from your perspective, now I understand why you behaved the way you did. It's not agreement. It's literally stepping in to the other person's shoes. So if we take our example, if Julie has a very upset girlfriend called Mary, if Julie can step into Mary's shoes, she can understand why Mary gets so upset because the last electricity bill was $1,700. But if Mary then steps into Julie's shoes, now she's got a better understanding of why unconsciously Julie leaves those lights on. Can you see how they can solve the problem a lot better when they both can understand it from each other's point of view? So this is the last exercise. I want you to go to page 36 and think about the last argument you had with someone, whether it's your friend, your lover, your mother, your children, and ask yourself, were you listening to understand, or were you listening to defend yourself? And I'll just put on the music for a sec. So what I want to introduce you to is I am going to be teaching a course called You Do You and I'll Do Me. And it's a 12-week course. And we will be exploring a lot of those concepts that I just briefly covered today. We're going to go into great depth. But one of the things I've found with my beta course, which is just ending, and I have to say, I'm delighted to say that every single participant so far is signing up for part 2, which I'm calling You Do You and I'll Do Me, the next level. But one thing I discovered is none of them do their homework. And I think part of why a lot of courses don't work is because people don't feel motivated to do their homework. So I'm going to show you the platform that the course will be on. So it starts with basically a video every week, and I'm going to go to the full screen here. It's going to be an interactive screen where what you're able to do is, for example, if there's sheets, you download the sheets. What are the goals for each week? And to make it a little bit more fun, okay, when you've completed a goal, you will click on a thing that says done it. So you click on that, and when you click on it, guess what happens? It makes a noise, right? That's what we call the dopamine rush, where you get a reward for doing the work. So, for example, if you had gone to this before our class, you would have clicked done it when you downloaded your workbook. You would have clicked it when you saved your Zoom link. And the first question that I asked you today, which was one area of your personal life where you've been playing yourself down or holding yourself back, you would have already written the response and hit done it. So what is the purpose of this? The purpose is that when we're left on our own without any sense of accomplishment or accountability, we don't tend to do things. But believe it or not, when you start hitting that cha-ching, it gives you a sense of accomplishment every single week. It also makes stepping out of your comfort zone a lot easier, because when you do the exercises, you get rewarded for it. And then what happens is at the end of the course, everyone will have accumulated different points. And then, of course, to make it a lot more fun, there are prizes that are appropriate and in line with the work that we're doing that you get as a result of doing it. But why do I ask people to do it? Because a lot of people didn't do their homework. Think about it like they came for a training session. Let's say I was training their bodies. And then I asked them to go off and do a few exercises in between our sessions. Well, because becoming seen, heard, and valued isn't a theory. You have to actually go out and do the work. If you're not doing it in between, you're actually robbing yourself of the benefit of doing the work, right? So this is a way, hopefully, that we will be able to motivate you to do the work. And then on top of our 2-hour sessions for 12 weeks for 2 hours, all right, then every second week, we're going to meet and discuss the exercises. Where did you feel resistance to it? What were you able to do well? What did you improve on? Or what did you find you had so much resistance to you couldn't even look at it, right? Because all of those are the obstacles getting in the way of us becoming the version of ourselves that we really want to be. So normally this doesn't happen, but in actual fact, one of our participants, Jonna, because we're just finishing up the 12-week course, our beta course, and we just had a wonderful 11 weeks, and our 12th week is this Saturday. Jonna, I was hoping maybe, do you mind telling everybody, what was your, in your own words, what was your takeaway from taking this program?
Hi, everyone. One of my takeaways has been the confidence that I've built in addressing certain situations in relationships. Even the mere fact of thinking about, oh gosh, I want to say something to this person and I'm not sure that I'm gonna be okay or feel safe enough to say it. How are they gonna accept this? How's the dialogue going to go? All those racing thoughts that can go through your head when you're about to approach somebody or a relationship. And this course has given me that confidence to be able to come to these people and sit and, really allow myself to feel everything that I feel, but know that I don't have to be so concerned or overly afraid of the outcome because of how the Imago dialogue goes. It actually diffuses a lot of those feelings that you might feel when you might get charged up to speak your truth. Mm-hmm. So I just want to say that I felt safer as we went each class mm-hmm. in unpacking the things that were coming up for me.
And how did you feel about your fellow participants? Because it takes a lot of vulnerability to talk about personal things. What did you notice?
Oh, I noticed just a loving and caring atmosphere, mm-hmm. total support, absolutely no judgment from anybody.
Did you find really they were encouraging?
Very encouraging. Like you felt like, that everybody has you, they're holding you. Mm-hmm. And you too, Carrie.
Oh, thank you.
Everybody has an opportunity to share and to feel being held. And mm-hmm. I think that's really important in this, when you're doing this type of work and unpacking these types of things. I think it's really important to feel very safe in a sacred container. And that's what you offer here.
Thank you. And I want to say, because it was the first time we'd done the course, what I noticed was the women were getting braver each week because there was no judgment, but also because of the safety. A lot of the participants felt they could talk about things that they wouldn't normally talk about, which was really transformative for all of us. Because I remember one woman had a hard conversation with her mother, and she said, "Jonna, I took you with me. After you told us about your conversation with your aunt, I was determined to do the same thing." It was really beautiful. And in both cases, it didn't blow up.
I just want to say that in when you get the opportunity to share, I know we can all feel very, you know, kind of want to hide from sharing. But when we get the opportunity to share, we have no idea how that's going to unlock something for somebody else. And this course proved that over and over again.
Oh, well, thank you. So I know everyone is pressed for time, but let me just really quickly tell you a little bit about the course. As I said, it is 12 weeks, so you get 30 hours of live coaching. And it's $1,247. And if you want to pay in two payments, you can pay at $673.50. And if you happen to be in Canada, I'm going to honor the Canadian rate as well, because I don't think it's fair that 1,247 is something like 1,800 Canadian. So, as I said, you get 30 hours of live coaching. And if you invest in this course, the other thing you're going to get, I don't know if all of you know about the emotional intelligence test, but it is a fantastic test and it's a $350 value. It's a test that you have to be licensed in order to give. So, what you'll do is you'll do the test, you'll get a report, and then on top of it, I'm going to do a 30-minute coaching class with you based on the results, which I have found a lot of the women chose to do it, and that it really reinforced their belief systems in terms of their negative belief systems. They saw it in the test because the 5 pillars are self awareness, self regulation, motivation, empathy, and people skills. So for a lot of women, they ended up finding out that even when they tested their negative belief systems, they showed up in the test. So it's also the biggest predictor of how you'll do stepping out of your comfort zone. And you do get a detailed emotional intelligence report. So that is today's incentive. And I want to thank all of you guys for coming and listening to my presentation. And I hope you took away some things, especially if it's just to think about, do I have this belief system and do I let it control my life? I mean, is it even accurate anymore? And maybe you can take a step to think about, what are ways that when I start to think, oh, nobody loves me, or I'm not valued, or I'm an imposter, I want you to challenge yourself to think about the situations when you have proof that it's not true. And if you go to the link that I sent you where you can see the platform, there's also a button if you'd like to talk to me more about it, although everyone in this room kind of knows me. So if you want to just have another phone call and talk about the program itself and what's involved, I'm more than happy to do that. I really believe in this. I've seen the transformation of the women that have taken this course, and not just Jonna. The work that we do is so experiential that it will stay with you. And when you start to feel you're getting back off track to those negative belief systems, you'll have the tools to bring you back to the present, to what's more accurate. So thank you. Thank you for being part of this. Thank you for attending. Jonna, thank you for coming and talking about it. And as I said, you guys know where to find me if you're interested in talking some more about it. And if you're ready to sign up, you just go to womenneedconnection.com.
Take
Okay.
care.
Bye.
Bye bye.